Hello, everybody. Hello, Karen. Karen says, hi, Eddie. Glad to be back. Me too. All right. So, before we get started, I want to remind everybody that we do have a WhatsApp. And you can look in the description. And so we have a WhatsApp group. It is only one way, so there is no participation because we figured out the hard way that people will put terrible stuff on there. So, but if you want to know when these are happening, go to the description, and there's the WhatsApp group. Karen says, "So sorry about your mom." Thank you very much. Thank you. Also, I want to hello, Jeffrey. I want to let everybody know the way I've tried to do this is to not monetize the Q and A while it's live. And then I try to remember, I don't always remember. When we close it down, I try to switch it to monetized. In other words, no ads while we are live, but ads afterwards. So I never told anybody that. But that's the way I've been wanting to do it. And I have a list now that I'm looking at. All right, so what about news? I'm going to let you guys know what is going on. We put the Christmas duet book on hold just for the time that we were doing the funeral. I have one more page to write, and just coincidentally, it is the dedication page, and I'm going to dedicate it to my mom. I don't normally, as a general rule, for the last 20 years, I do not dedicate to people who have already passed away. And that's my own rule, and no, I don't expect anybody to understand that. But I am making an exception this time because when I started writing that page, my mom was still alive. So, but normally I don't do, and I don't mind telling you guys about that. It was in the 90s when a trumpet player friend of mine passed away, and I went to the funeral, and it upset me. Maybe upset me is the wrong word, but I really had a lot to think about. It was in El Paso, and driving back home, I had a lot to think about, and I just realized I don't want to put anybody down or anything like that, but I just realized that a lot of times we have a tendency to only treat people nice after they've died. Okay, there were people in that funeral in the 90s that I knew for sure weren't actually getting along with him before he died. And they show up to the funeral and want to make it sound like they were best buddies. But it's too late then. So I have lived my life since the mid 90s trying to let everybody know that I care about. Let everybody know that I care about um that I care about them, right? That I try to acknowledge them and keep in touch and all that stuff so that after they're gone, I don't feel like I have to say something at that point. So, um, and that's why when I do dedications in my books and stuff like that, it's always for people who are still alive. So, I might break that rule every once in a while, but as a general rule, that's how I live my life. Um, Other news, let me see. Can't really think of much. Um, and the last thing on my list here of what to say before we get started is I do have, I want to start telling people about my performances on this YouTube thing. And I do have every Tuesday night in Galveston. I play with the Galveston Beach Band. I started off with them as a sub, and now I do every week. Have been doing every week, I think, since, I don't know, I guess four years maybe. I can't remember. Um, so if you are in the area, Galveston on Tuesday nights, I think it's 7:30 at night. It's the Galveston Beach Band. We're out in front of the museum. Not the museum, the library. All right. Anybody got any questions? What questions do we want to get started with? I'm surprised more of the high school students don't come to this. If I wrote this year again, I wrote all three of the jazz all-state etudes. I guess that would have been news to talk about, huh? Um, all three of the all-state etudes for the state of Texas. Hey, notice how I say that Texas. I'm actually a Yankee, but I've been here so long, some of that southern twang rubs off on me. Um, but yeah, you would think that because I wrote the etudes that people would, you know, want to pop on here and ask questions about how to play it or what what strategy to take or stuff like that. But I've noticed that from the very beginning that the high school students today are different from the high school students when I was in high school, right? There's something very, very different about the kids today. We were eager. And I don't think it was just me and my school. And I think back then you wanted help. You sought out people that knew what they were doing. You didn't know that you already knew everything. Anyway, any questions? Well, I can see that we're low attendance today. That's all right. I'm actually very sleepy. Maybe that's coming off. Um, and it is summertime. I'm sure a lot of people are out doing stuff. Yeah, what else can I talk about till we get a question? My room is a mess right now, and that's because we're going to try to shift everything back to the bookshelf but take all the books out. Okay, here's Karen with a question. I played in a concert Monday and went past the point of exhaustion. That night, my tooth was killing me. Could I have pushed so hard as to bruise a nerve or something? Yes, absolutely. Um, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I've had that before. Okay, let me reword that. It's it's a sign that you want to like not use as much pressure. That's so in that regard, it is a bad thing. But I don't think having a bruised gum or bruised we don't really bruise teeth, so it would be a bruised gum. Um, I don't think that when that happens, um, that it's like permanent damage or anything like that. I've had that before, and in fact, I'm gonna tell you. Um, so yeah, that's right. It doesn't hurt at all now. I went to the dentist and he couldn't find anything wrong. There you go. That's what I'm saying. Is I'm gonna tell you that when I was before I made my big changes, and some of you know this already about me. I changed everything in 1985. I think it was 85. Um, I basically did a full rebuild of my embouchure. And be up to that time, I had bruised gums. You know what you're talking about, where you push too hard and the tooth up there it starts to hurt. I had that almost constantly. I had also a purple mark where my mouthpiece went. Um, Obviously, both of those are signs of too much pressure. You don't get that from using too much muscle, right? And when you use too much muscle, actually there is no such thing as too much muscle. So that's just an indication that you still have room to improve your endurance. But yeah, I wouldn't worry about it. It's most definitely something related to playing the trumpet. This is part of the reason why we do those challenging routines. Especially now when I wrote the first set of routines, the daily routines, when I wrote that, I didn't know as much as I know now. Obviously, I mean, that's how life works. Um, but even just the daily routines is good enough to give you the extra chops so that when you go to the to the concert, when you go to the rehearsal, what you play in band does not push you past the point of fatigue because what you're playing in the routine is just harder already. And that back when I wrote most of that stuff in the beginning, that was my philosophy. It wasn't as deep of a philosophy as I have now. Back then, my philosophy was you just push yourself so much at home that nothing is ever going to push you to that point when you're in a performance or in a rehearsal. So Karen says, I'll say, I'm rebuilding since being so tired. That's right. So, being that tired actually does help to build that strength. Being that tired does help. As long as you started off using more muscle. Um, So yes, that is going to help because you reached like the words that you said were past the point of exhaustion. And that's always going to go a long way towards building more muscle. Now, yes, you do have other types of injury. So if you injured your tooth that badly, you also injured your lips. You would have had inflammation in the lips as well. So so yeah, the the process of healing and the process of doing the strength building Now you can also, if you wanna to, take that to another level, you can have exercises that build the strength, like the Pete exercise. I demonstrated the Pete exercise to, um, one of my students, a brand new student that I just picked up, who's actually from my mom's hometown, kind of, like the next town over. Um, but yeah, I talked to him about the Pete and showed him how to use it. The Pete gives you that extra strength. It still doesn't, nothing replaces the time you spend on your horn. But a lot of times we don't have time to spend on the horn. So it's nice, like if you're driving or something, to pull that Pete in your lips, um, to get. Now, all the stuff that we talk about in strength building, where you alternate days, applies to doing the Pete. You don't do the Pete all the time. Now, according to my method, right? I'm sure that the guys that make the Pete um, probably feel differently. But if you want to maximize your growth, your physical growth, then you do that same 3-day rotation. And I would only do that Pete either every other day or every third day. In other words, twice a week. Hello, Joaquin. Joaquin says, "Hi, Eddie. Sorry for your loss." Well, thank you very much. Welcome to the chat. Karen says, "I started using the Pete, but gave it up because it seemed to be a hindrance. Maybe I wasn't using it correctly." So, in what way did it seem to be a hindrance? You know, you can do too much of it. And so, if you do too much Pete, and I recommend usually to my students that they should do it at night. If you're doing too much, you can almost not play the next day. It's it's easy to overdo it. Maybe that's what you're talking about. So that could be. She says it wasn't making me stronger, perhaps weaker. Um, so you have to. This goes back to all the, everything we've said about strength. If you don't do it enough, or if you do it too much, both of those are bad. So when you do the peak correctly, all of this should start. I don't know what the word we should use. Um, it should all start to burn. Everything in the face here should start to burn around here. And maybe the corners, depending on how strong your corners are. So yeah, and it also it also matters how long you're pulling. Now I told this other student, I don't tell everybody the same thing, right? I told this other student that you should only pull, you know, a minute or two. But really, you should pull until you're starting to feel like you can't hold it anymore. As a general rule, you should pull it until you feel like you can't hold it anymore. Like the lips start to quiver and you feel like you're going to let go. So, yes, it can be one or the other. It can be you're not doing it enough, um, or that you're just doing too much of it so that it makes you so tired you can't play it. Now, if I had to choose between the two, I would choose doing it too much and being so weak that I can't play the next day. I would rather have that because you're still going to get strength. You're still going to gain more strength that way. You just have to, what it does is it ruins the next practice day. So let's say a hypothetical Tuesday night. Because I say Tuesday night because that's my biggest day, right? If I do this a lot, and or too much for what I'm talking about, if I do this too much, if I do the peak too much, the next day, Wednesday, is just uh, I'll pick up the horn and I'll be so disgusted with what's coming out. I just might even choose to not practice that day because it's just so bad. Um, Joaquin says, what is a good trumpet brand to use? Any of the professional brands, So I'm going to name some off the top of my head, but these are all good brands. I'm not like a lot of others who think there's a right brand. I do think you find what works for you over the years, but any of the professional brands. So I'm going to start with Bach just because that's what I play, and then you have Yamaha, which I also play. Um, Shoki is a good brand. Holton, if they're still around, I don't know if Holton still is around. Benge, even the Blessing trumpets. It used to be that Blessing wasn't very well respected, but I think Blessing is also a good. So any of those, generally speaking, if you want a good trumpet, just avoid those really, really cheap trumpets, like the $100 trumpets. If that trumpet is $100 and it's brand new, there's got to be something wrong with it. Now, I have had some students that bought those really, really cheap trumpets that looked out, and the trumpet wasn't so bad. I've had other students, more students, that bought the really, really cheap stuff and did not look out. They bought instruments that were not playable. The one guy had there's this term that we use in the trumpet world called slotting, right? And basically, the slot is when you play the horn and it goes to that note. And the more it slots, the more it goes to that note like a magnet, and it won't move around. This one trumpet that the student bought could move the note up almost a minor third, down almost a minor third, and uh, and he couldn't understand why it was so hard to play. Well, if it doesn't slot at all like that, then it's going to be a hard horn to play on. So yeah, I would just say go with the main brands. Now, you can also go with, by the way, some of the custom horns like Blackburn. These tend to be a lot more expensive. The handmade custom horns. Uh, Monet Monet is the most expensive trumpet. Um, Taylor, I think, is one. These instruments tend to be more expensive than the factory horns. Gustavo Scaravini, saludos de Paysandú, Uruguay. Thanks for popping in. Nice to see you. Um, I don't know how well I'm saying those words. I know what they mean, except for I'm sure that's a city name, Paysandú. Paysandú. There's an accent at the end. So, Well, thank you, and welcome to the Q and A. Joaquin says some of my classmates bring their trumpets they bought from an online Indian store that was 20 to 200 bucks. That's right, and so that's what I'm saying. Sometimes those can be okay. Now, the best argument I heard about buying the cheap stuff, because really, think about it this way. If you buy a horn for 50 bucks and it's terrible, you can just buy another horn for 50 bucks and you're still doing really, really good financially. So you can buy cheap and still save a lot of money and somehow end up with a good horn. But the best argument that I heard against these cheap horns is that if they break, you're going to have trouble finding someone that can fix them because the parts are not the same parts as what you would have from another trumpet, like the local brands. So getting parts to fix those, but then the same argument applies. If you buy a trumpet for $50 and it breaks, and now you buy another one for $50, you're still doing a whole bunch better. If the bottom line is you want to save money, you're still doing a whole bunch better than the guys are spending $3,000, $4,000 on their first trumpet, right? So yeah. Any other questions? Joaquin says, when is the third TMEA Etude video going to be out? Well, let me tell you what happened. I was hoping this week, but that didn't happen. Because I was gone for basically 2 teaching weeks because I missed last week and I missed the week before due to traveling. I didn't want to fly. Um, and so we do makeups. Not everybody has to do a makeup, but we do makeups for those, you know, that where that's appropriate. And so this week has just been super, super busy with lots and lots of makeup lessons. So I'm hoping, I don't know. I've got lessons tomorrow too. I don't work on Sundays. So it might be sometime next week. I was hoping this week, but that didn't happen. Also, that complicated the issue. I got back into town, and this might have, I don't know, I did have an injury. Um, because of the arid climate over there in Arizona, but also it the playing just didn't return the way it normally does after an injury or after maybe it's the combination, I don't know. But I wasn't able to actually play properly until last night, which is really, really weird for me. That's a whole week after getting back. So even if I had tried to do the video, um, I don't think I could have. My lips were so stiff. Now I did a gig I told you we're doing Tuesday nights, and nobody noticed that I was suffering, right? Nobody noticed, but I did. I noticed how stiff I was and how crackly my sound was and stuff like that. Now, maybe they did notice and didn't tell me. I don't know. So, yes, I'm hoping sometime next week. So, what happened, the reason it didn't get done with the other ones is I actually got called about the funeral while I was recording. And I had started the third one, didn't like the takes that I did. And then my sister calls and says, "Hey, I think it's going to be on Thursday." And so if it was on Thursday, which it wasn't, but I figured if it's on Thursday, I've got to put everything in the car now and get on the road early in the morning. So that's why I didn't get recorded with the others. The intention was to record it, but there just wasn't any time. Joaquin says that happens to me as well when I go out of town for a week or two and I haven't practiced. So here's the thing. This is the weird thing, right? Is that in the past, I've been able to go as much as, this is not an exaggeration, as much as 6 weeks without touching my horn. And I come back, everything's just normal. So something different happened this time. I don't know what it was. Um, and I'm not, you guys, if you are regulars on my channel, you know I don't believe in practicing every day. So there have been, since the late 90s, there have been many times that I went as long as 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks without playing my horn. I don't like to play my horn when I'm traveling unless I have a gig. And even if I have a gig, I don't practice while I'm out. That's just the way I've been doing it for, like I said, over 20 years. Um, this time it was different. Now, I can tell you that last time I went to South Africa, I played in the jazz festival in Grahamstown. They don't call it Grahamstown anymore. Um, they're changing all the names of towns to African names. But back then it was called Grahamstown, and I went to this jazz festival, and I was playing in the big band. The flight from uh, from Houston to East London, that flight destroyed my chops. So it had nothing to do with how long we were off the horn. I got so dehydrated on that flight that when I got to Grahamstown and put the horn to my lips, nothing would come out. This time I wasn't dehydrated, and it was sort of similar to what happened in Grahamstown, just not as severe. And I'll tell you what I did in Grahamstown to make it so that I could play is these old exercises. They're originally from the Schlossberg book, but I don't do it in the order that's in Schlossberg. So when I have this problem where the lips are so stiff and chapped and they just won't vibrate, when I have this problem, I do this very simple Schlossberg exercise, but I do it starting with the lower notes. Notice how soft I'm playing. That's almost whisper tones. That's almost soft enough to be whisper tones. Now, when my lip isn't working right, that's going to be mostly air. The whole point is to do these whisper tones until they start to sound like what they're sounding now. So after C and B, you do B and B flat. And you just keep going down chromatically. When you get down to low F sharp, then you go to the next one up to G. And so you go through all those exercises. I don't think that's the order that's in the Schlossberg book. But I've been using that exercise very, very, very soft as a repair exercise for since the 80s. And there's something about that exercise that helps get everything here moving again. Even if you're really chapped, even if the lips are bruised, there's something about it. I remember I was in college and the maestro of the El Paso Symphony heard me warming up. I used to be in the El Paso Symphony and 2 seasons with that orchestra. And he heard me warming up and he said that was the best trumpet warm up he ever heard. So that's what I remember about that exercise. But yes, if when I was warming up like that in El Paso, that's what I was using it for. It wasn't a warm up. In El Paso, you kind of get used to the arid climate, but it's still torturous to play like that. What you get used to is having to do that. All right. Any other questions? Yeah, I'm even teaching. I don't normally teach on Fridays. I'm even teaching today after this. Because otherwise we wouldn't get all the students in. And then tomorrow we have lessons in the morning um and then a church function and then lessons in the afternoon and then another church function on Sunday. So yes, it's been very busy here. You know what I'd like to do? I know this isn't trumpet related. One of these days when I have this trip down to Galveston, like if a student cancels, because I go straight from teaching down to Galveston. One of these days, if a student cancels, I think I'm going to go down and spend a day fishing before I go to that gig. I still haven't caught a keeper redfish. I've caught a lot of little ones like that, but I think it has to be like 28 inches or something like that to take it home. And I still haven't caught one of those. Now, someone told me last time when I was out there that if I take a crab and cut it in half and put that on the hook and go to a certain spot, he says for sure I would get a keeper red. So I would like to do that someday. That's the place he told me to go is not far from where we play. Anyway, that's not trumpet related. Any questions? I'll tell you guys what I'm working on compositionally. Right now, the composition I'm working on is a mass, believe it or not, for 7 trumpets. Doing the different parts of the mass. I've kind of bogged down on it because I think sometimes when I do stuff like that, it's sort of like what my last teacher said about Petrushka, playing Petrushka. He says, "You're making too much out of it. Just play the piece. The music stuff is already in there." He says it's like ragu spaghetti sauce. It's in there. You don't have to add more. Just play the thing. Because I was going da da dee da 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 dee da 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 dee da, and he says, "No, no, 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 don't do any of that. Da da dee da 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 dee da 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 dee," and then the music is just contained in there. Same thing when I'm thinking, okay, now I'm writing a mass. This better be, you know, very like heavenly and every time I write something, I say, no, no, this isn't angelic enough. And I think I'm just making too much out of it. I think I need to back up and just write the way I write and not make a big deal out of it. So yes, I kind of got bogged down on that, but that's the main project right now is I'm writing it for a trumpet ensemble in Finland. And if you go to I'll open this up right now and put a link. If you go to my website, I have a page on my website that has videos of people playing my music. And this Finnish group, the group from Finland, let's see here. The group from Finland let me see, has a video. They play all but the last movement of one of my suites, which is very, very cool, really. Okay, here's the page. Let me copy this and I'll put it in there. I call the page Sheet Music Performances. There's about, I don't know, it looks like about 2 dozen videos. The one I put at the top is University of Washington or something like that, playing my 7 and 10. So the link I just sent is for that page. And the one at the top after that main video on the left, the one at the top, and I don't know how to pronounce Finnish words. I'm gonna assume Musta Havonen. That's the name of the group, Musta Havonen. And the the video is of them playing my Americana trumpet suite, every movement except the last movement. So I'm writing this mass for them, which is very exciting. For me, it's very exciting. They sent me the link to this video 1 year after they had begun working on that piece. And it's, you know what, for me, as the one that wrote it, I listened to them playing, and I couldn't be happier with how they played this piece. Really. I couldn't be happier with how they did it. It sounds, and if you watch the video, some of these students in this group are very young. They look like they're junior high age students. So it's very impressive that they sound that good when half of the band is really, really young students. Oh, excuse me. Any other questions? So this page has videos by Charles Young, who is a student of mine. Saitama Luminos Wind Orchestra, that's I think, Japanese trumpet trio that did my tackle suite. There's a group called Maroon 3 Trumpet Ensemble that did it's a University of Oregon. Students at the University of Oregon, they did my Salvation and Deliverance trumpet trio. Then a guy, I don't know his name, his handle is Trumpet for Jesus. He did my Mary Did You Know. A guy named Zach Marley did my trombone etude. I have written some of the trombone etudes for the Texas Jazz All-State over the years. So this is one of those recordings. The University of Washington trumpet section did 7 and 10. I told you that already. So a student group in, I think, Brazil, they call themselves Rocco Reno Caponio, did Morning Light. Oh, no, they did 3 different pieces. Oh, no, this is not, I'm sorry, that's the Italian group, a student group in Italy that did 3 of my pieces, Morning Light, Something Better, and Still Small Voice. I got that mixed up. Here's the one in Brazil. Victoria Barros. She did still small voice too. Anyway, a bunch of these, and it goes back. The earliest one is 2012. If you guys know of anybody that's performing my stuff, let me know if there's videos, and I'll put their videos on here if they're not there. So yes, isn't this amazing, right? I'm just some nobody that writes trumpet music, and people all over the world, these are just the ones that made videos. I know that people are playing my music because I get royalties from Europe, mostly from Europe, and mostly, well, of course, mostly from America. But I get performance royalties every once in a while. And people are playing this stuff. And then I also hear from people that say, "Hey, this is a great piece. We played it here. We played it there." Um, to me, that's more amazing than the performance side, in my opinion, because this is something that just can grow and grow and grow and grow. So yeah, other pieces. Let me see. Something's gonna happen. I got an email recently from a student group that said they were about to perform "Something's Gonna Happen" in a either a convention or a festival. I don't remember what it was. And they just wanted to email me and say thank you for writing such a exciting piece. And then Stardust. I think Stardust is on here 2 or 3 times. Um, the Angels from the Realms of Glory duet. There's a group in, I think, Washington, D.C., or somewhere around there, that performed at a church my piece called Hosanna to the Son of David, which is a Palm Sunday piece. And they did it, that was another group of like young students. Um, and they did a great job on that piece. It's not so easy. So Karen says you are so multi-talented. Do you write for concert bands? Well, now that you mention it, there's a piece that I wrote, actually 2 pieces right now. And, you know, I'm going to give you as an example how I am. I still don't have a C trumpet. Why don't I have a C trumpet? Because it seems like a waste to buy a C trumpet if I'm not getting C trumpet gigs. And the C trumpet I want is like $5,000. I want a Blackburn C trumpet. Um, I thought maybe that was just in my head, and then the last time I went to the convention, I played that same trumpet again, and I'm like, that's what I want. If I'm gonna play C trumpet again, I want that. But I'm not gonna buy that if it's never gonna get played. And it's the same thing. I don't like to. My policy since I moved to Pittsburgh, I was told by my composition professor, Joseph Packley's. I was told that when I got to Pittsburgh, I should call up this famous composer because he had a ensemble there. Now, I just wanted to make the connection to this guy, but when I called him, I forget his name, David. I want to say David Stock, but that's the name of a trumpet player. Let me see. Okay, it is David Stock. Um, he was the conductor of the Pittsburgh New Music Ensemble. And I called him up and I talked to him. I just wanted to connect with him, but he asked me questions about what I was writing. And I told him the first piece, I told him the second piece, I told him the third piece. And after that, he says, "You don't really like to get your stuff performed, do you?" And that like hit me like a bag of bricks. I'll say that again. He says, "You don't really like to get your stuff performed." Now, obviously, that's not true. I would like everybody to perform my music. What was he saying? He was talking about the instrumentation. There is no band that has the instrumentations I was writing for. I had one piece that was 2 flutes, alto flute, 2 clarinets, and bass clarinet. And while that sounds really cool, there aren't pre existing ensembles out there with that instrumentation. Another one I told him about was flugelhorn, uh, 3 clarinets, 2 bass clarinets, a bassoon. There's no ensemble that has that. You don't have ensembles with those instrumentations. So when he said, "You don't like to get your music performed," he was talking about the instrumentation. So here's what my decision was. You know how I am. I maybe perhaps overly principled, but after that conversation, and this was like 1987, I think. After that conversation, I decided I was never going to write anything again that had no chance of getting performed. So where I am on the concert band stuff is I have 2 pieces I want to write. One of them is a march. It's called New Braunfels March. And so I already have a brass quintet version of that. I already have a 2 trumpets and piano version of it. But I really think it would make a great concert band march. The reluctance that I have is that I would spend all that time putting it together and nobody would ever play it. So that's what's holding me back on that. And the same thing with this other piece. I wrote a piece called um, A Prophet's Journey or something like that. And it's a trumpet and band piece. I've I'm kind of stuck. The band version of it is almost done. I'm working on the percussion, but I don't have a lot of motivation to get that done because I don't know that anybody would ever play it. And when David Stock said to me, "You don't want to get your pieces played," it really opened my eyes to the practicality of this stuff. It's very easy. I know people who have been writing their whole lives, and the number of performances they get on their pieces is almost nothing. That's something that makes my composition career very, very different. Just about everything I've written has been performed. And I'm going to tell you, that's extremely unusual. But the reason it's been performed is because I write for the groups that I play with. And maybe that's the answer. I don't play with a concert band. I don't play with a concert band. If I played with one that I knew would present a piece that I worked on, then I would have that motivation to get it done. Now, Karen, if you would like to perform it with one of those concert bands, I would put a priority on it and get it done so you could play it. Either the march or the solo, the trumpet solo. I think the trumpet solo is one of the best pieces I've ever written. And now that I'm adding the percussion, I've got some like that's not considered exotic, but it sounds exotic the way I'm using it. Percussion parts, and it really has brought the piece to life in a way that the trumpet and piano version doesn't. There's already a trumpet and piano version, and I've performed that with my son. Um, if you've been watching my videos, you've probably seen it. I think it's called Prophet's Journey. I'm sure that's what it's called. Oh no, it's not Prophet's Journey, it's the Apostles' Journey. And the reason I named that, because I dedicated it to a trumpet player. He's a blind trumpet player in Florida. His name is Paul. So I named it Apostles' Journey because the Apostle Paul was an apostle, right? Um, so that's why I called it that. So I wrote it originally for him. But the well, that's just weird. But yeah, it's a very, I think it's one of the best pieces I've ever written. And the band version of it, I have written, let me tell you this, I have written some large ensemble, nothing concert band, but I've written some orchestra stuff, um, and of course some big band stuff. But the orchestra stuff was always for commercial events. Um, but yeah, it's not like I can't do that stuff. I've actually been fairly successful at writing large ensemble stuff. But like I said, I don't want to write stuff just to write it. It's not. I don't have this egotistic thing where I have to do what I want to do. I don't have that. It makes no sense to me to do, and think about it from a commercial perspective, right? If I want my stuff to sell, it's got to get performed. There's no better way to advertise your compositions than for other people to be playing it. When other bands play your pieces, then the other people will say, "Hey, look, these people are playing this piece and it sounds really cool. Let's get our hands on that and we'll try it ourselves." That's how that works. And it takes a lot when you do it this way, it takes a lot of pressure off of the composer. A lot of times the composers spend a lot of uh, a majority of their business time trying to convince people to do their stuff, like on the sales side or something. And I don't really have to do that because people are already playing my stuff. And it's because I write for either the groups that I play with or people that I know are going to play my music. So, like these guys in Finland, and there have been people like that. I wrote a sax quartet. Now, unfortunately, the sax quartet hasn't been performed yet, but I wrote it for a friend of mine. Um, that's that. That's also a very cool piece. I hope one day he does get to play it. What else have I done? Someone asked me to write a trumpet and tuba duet. That it was the two guys in the Houston Symphony, the principal trumpet and the tuba for the Houston Symphony wanted a duet specifically written for them, and I wrote a duet for them. There's a bunch of these. There's the trumpet ensemble at the University of Texas at El Paso. I wrote a trumpet piece for them, for 5 trumpets. So yes, I do write for other people if I know they're going to play it. If I know they're going to play it, then I will write the music. It's pretty rare. That's like I said, that's why I'm hesitant to finish the band version of this music. And if anyone watching this, I know most people watch these after the fact. If anyone watching this has a band that wants to do either the march or the it's New Braunfels March or the Apostles' Journey, um, Anybody that has a band that wants to do those, get in touch with me and I will finish those two things up so that you can play them with your ensembles. I just don't like to write stuff that's not going to get played. That irritates me when that happens. And there, um, and I don't blame the guy, the people that this happened with, but that piece, and I'm very glad that it got performed. Okay, but that piece, the Americana Trumpet Suite, I didn't write that for myself. I wrote that for a trumpet ensemble in Hamlin LaGrange University. I don't know where that's at. Midwest, I think. And I wrote the piece. It took me, I'm not exaggerating, it took me like 6 months to write it. Then the the conductor of the ensemble had some sort of like back injury or something like that, and the ensemble uh, got disbanded or something. So they never performed the piece after I spent 6 months of my writing time writing for them. And I'm not complaining, but with what I just told you, how I don't like to write stuff that's not going to get performed, that's irritating. And same thing with the sex piece. You know, I don't think some of these guys know what it takes to write. I don't think they know how offensive that is. Someone spends 6 months of their life writing somebody a piece, and then they have, anyway, like I said, I don't want to sound like I'm complaining, but I don't like writing for stuff that's not going to get performed. I really don't. Anyway, so we're 8 minutes past time. Um, Karen says we are playing Tuba Tiger Rag. Hey, that's a nice piece. And I'm struggling with some of the rhythms. You know, the the syncopation stuff, you really have to do that subdivision um and break it down. Sometimes what makes it hard is the way they write it. So like if it's syncopated 16th notes, um when they if it's in 2/4 and it's syncopated 16th notes, it would have been better to write it in cut time with syncopated eighth notes. Then people like have less difficulty. Karen says that's our conductor's favorite word, subdivide. Yeah, so you just slow it down with a metronome and drill. Now, here's the cool thing about that stuff. You can just drill two measures until you master that two measures. The skill that you get from that two measures will now overflow into the rest of the piece. That's the nice thing about that is yes, the skill does overflow. Now that doesn't mean you can do two measures and the whole piece is now all of a sudden learned. I don't mean that. But if you have that same rhythm again or a similar rhythm coming up later, it's not as foreign to you anymore. So it's worth the time that you spend on just two measures, mastering that two measures. It's worth it because the rest of the piece is going to be easier after that. All right, guys, thank you for joining us. Um, I hope you guys have a great weekend and a good week, and we will do this again next week. God bless you, and We'll see you next time.